no books. Either you're right, the humanities isn't real. A real beef with Robinson Crusoe. Welcome back. I applied to like 6 jobs yesterday, so I decided I could take today off to make another video. I'm feeling very anxious today, and there's probably many reasons for that. Anxiety is not a rational thing, but I think perhaps one of the reasons is that I am not going back to school this fall. Now, is it fall if it's August 28th? That's up for debate. My school goes back very early, and I'm not there. So I thought I'd do a little retrospective of all the books I read over the course of my English degree. We're not going into any plot summaries, anything like that. I guess I'm really anti telling you anything about the book other than the title, but the gimmick here is sort of books I read, and I did read these. I think there's only one in these stacks that I phoned it in because I'm a reader. I enjoy reading. That's why I majored in English. There's only one book on this list that I didn't fully read. Everything else I read, or I don't own it anymore, because there are a couple books that I had for sure, especially some of the earlier classes, that I just, for whatever reason, not enough shelves, had to get this one, get more shelf space. For whatever reason, some of the books no longer with me. I don't remember them. So for instance, with this first class, there's only 2 books remaining, and we certainly read more than that. I feel like I'm rambling. Did that make any sense? We're just going through all the books I read. I don't think we'll get to the list that I curated for my senior thesis, because let me explain. I majored in English with a focus in creative writing. So that means I probably didn't read quite as much as your average literature major, because some of my classes were more writing focused, hence the focus in creative writing. But I still read a lot of books, and we're gonna go through those books, and I'm just gonna show them to you. Let's get started. Freshman year. Fall semester, I took English 101. And by 101, I mean 102, because it was the intro creative writing class. And we didn't read any books. Because it was all short stories and poetry that were PDFs, which is nice because that means you don't have to buy anything. Moving on. Spring semester, freshman year. I took English 101, the real one this time, which at my school they change the topic of every year. And the semester I took it, the topic was Black Queer Studies. And I still have 2 books from that class. I really enjoyed it. The professor left after that semester, so I hope he's doing well, because he was great, but then I never got to take another class from him. My favorite book gotta be Giovanni's Room. We read this about halfway through, I think, or maybe it was near the end. It was a while ago, so I really don't remember. But it's a beautiful book, like everyone says, so I still have it to this day. Next up, Zami, A New Spelling of My Name, Audre Lorde's biomythography. I keep seeing this one in the store shelved as fiction, and so I'm not sure, because it definitely has elements of memoir. I don't know whether or not it was real or made up. I don't really care, because it was great. And that's why I still have it. There was probably a bunch of other stuff we read that I don't remember because I don't have them anymore. Although there was one book, and I don't remember what it was called, but I know it was by this author who the professor, like, that was his focus and what he was writing a book about this other writer. And the copy I have, this makes no sense because I don't remember the titles or the author, but the copy I happened to buy for like $5 was a first edition hardcover that was signed by the author, Randall Keenan. That's the guy. Still don't remember the book, but Randall Keenan. I had a signed first edition hardcover of this book, and so at the end of the semester I gave it to my professor, because that's his guy, you know, that's what he does. And he was very grateful, even though he was about to move across the country, so he really should not have been accepting more books. And then he gave me a copy of that book, which I now no longer have. I'm sorry. And that's a wrap on freshman year. At this rate, the video is going to be over immediately. Unfortunately, as the years go on, there are more books. Moving on to sophomore year, fall semester, I don't recall reading any books. We must have read short stories or other things. That was a weird class. But the English class I took that semester, even though it wasn't a creative writing centered class, we also did not read any books. I don't know, you figure out why. But that means already we get to move on to spring semester sophomore year, which was my favorite English class, mostly because of the professor, but also because it was one of those English classes that only had like 9 other people in it, and so it was just sort of like a big book club. But that class was Transatlantic Crossings. And these are the books I still have. Let's go. We'll try to put them in order. I think this is the order in which we read them. We read a lot of stuff. Some of them were online. This wasn't everything. I'll just go through them all and then decide which one was my favorite. Aruniko by Aphra Behn. This has a claim to be the first novel. Aphra Behn wrote a lot of plays, but this is not a play. It's very complicated. If you want to look up the story behind this book and also the story of this book, I don't feel like I remember enough to do it justice off the top of my head. I'm sure if I went back in my notes, I could figure it out, but this is what we started with. It's fine. It's like as good as any long form narrative written in the 1600s in English could be. Next, we read Robinson Crusoe. Maybe my least favorite book I've ever read, which doesn't make sense why the class in which I read it ended up being my favorite class, but I wrote an essay about this book. I read it all. There are no chapters, fun fact, in Robinson Crusoe, if you've never read it. It's just one long thing. This one also has claimed to be the first English language novel. I don't think it deserves it based on how badly it's written. A real beef with Robinson Crusoe. The Woman of Color we read as well in Transatlantic Crossings. This might be my favorite of the books we read. It's by an anonymous author, and I remember the professor telling us that scholars had done this stylometry thing, you know, where they run the text through a machine and it matches it up best with any author from the past who could have written it. It came out with like a 99% match to Jane Austen, which we know is not true, right? Like, people know a lot about Jane Austen and her life, and there's no way she could have written this. And also it doesn't it's about a woman of color, a unique literary account of a Black heiress's life immediately after the abolition of the British slave trade. If you like Jane Austen, I do recommend it because it's a very Austen-esque plot. There's lots of drama, but it was really enjoyable, at least for me. Next up in this class, we have the interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano, written by himself. This is the one that, I'll be honest, I did not finish, and I'm sorry, Olaudah Equiano. I don't know why I still own it, probably because it's so skinny, it doesn't take up a lot of space. It was interesting. It's a lot, as like a historical document, it's really fascinating, but like from a writing standpoint, it's dense, and I think I stopped about halfway. We were reading like a book a week in that class, which maybe isn't a lot to some people, but it's, you gotta build up your stamina. And so I never finished it, but I still own it. Last up, which I also loved, Charlotte Temple and Lucy Temple by Susanna Rosen. Now, Charlotte Temple and Lucy Temple, it's technically 2 different books, but they sort of like, one is a sequel. Golly, drama. I think these are sensation novels, first published in 1794. If you're looking for an interesting classic that's a wild and crazy time, I recommend these. I enjoyed them. Is this making any sense? Is this interesting? I don't know. I'm sort of just going through all the books. So that was Transatlantic Crossings. Freshman and sophomore year combined. This brings us to junior year. Here they are. First up, I took a class called Japanese Literature in Translation, and you can probably guess what we read there. Kokoro by Natsume Soseki, which I'll be honest, I didn't love. Again, I'm not sure why I still have it, but I do. Masks by Fumiko Enchi. This one was more interesting, and you gotta love a nice short Japanese novel. I enjoyed this. And then the one I enjoyed most, my beloved Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. This book is just, I mean, it's got some dark elements, but it's just like a delight and kind of one of those books that's unlike anything else. And I know a lot of people have read it, so I'm not saying anything new or exciting about that, but I really enjoyed it. And I also got the audiobook because I ran out of time to read it, and so I listened to it on the drive back to school when I was driving back for the class where we had to talk about it. which I wouldn't recommend doing. Fun fact about me, I grew up learning and speaking Japanese. If you're like, why is she doing a Japanese accent when she pronounces these names? That's why. That was Japanese Lit and Translation. Also that fall semester, I took fiction writing, which is a difficult class to get into because everybody and their mother wants to take it. And this was the book that we read, The Art of Subtext. It did spoil Moby Dick for me because I was still reading Moby Dick then. Which okay, that's sort of on me that I hadn't been spoiled already, right? But it's a book that's purely like about craft, you know, like it's not a story, it's not a memoir, it's examining elements of fiction. I wouldn't say I learned a whole lot from the book, but I did learn a lot from that class, and I wrote some great stuff and had a great time. So there we have it, The Art of Subtext. Now, moving on to spring semester of junior year, the semester that I went abroad. So I took 3 English classes. Unfortunately, none of them counted towards my major because they were all like transfer credits. But the first class I'll be talking about is, well, the first class where we didn't read anything was script writing. And that's the class where I learned I do not enjoy script writing. The next class was called Shakespeare Perspectives. Now, we didn't actually have to read any of these. I read The Taming of the Shrew and Macbeth on my own, just because I was enjoying being in Shakespeare time so much. We read, let's see, there was a Hamlet graphic novel. It was all about adaptations and reinterpretations of Shakespeare, which, as someone who had no background in Shakespeare, I didn't read any Shakespeare in high school or in college up to that point. My only context for it was being a general fan of the English language and my mother, who's an English teacher. So I did a little background reading for myself. We didn't even talk about Macbeth in class. That was just for me. And it's great. I've read it twice now. The Taming of the Shrew, I know it's sort of a tricky one, but it is still kind of my favorite. There's so much to dig into and talk about with this one. We weren't required to read it, but we were required to watch 10 Things I Hate About You, which I'm always happy to do because that's a great movie. And then we also read several sonnets. Clearly I liked these all enough to bring them back from England, although that's not saying a lot because I brought a lot of books back from England because books are so cheap in England. I'm jealous. It's fine. The final class I took was a class called Literature at Work, which was all about like how to get a job with a literature degree, which I think is a great idea to have, but I wasn't getting a literature degree in England, and so a lot of it just didn't apply. But I still have 3 of the books we read. I know, you're shocked. First book I'm gonna talk about, it's called Crusoe's Daughter. Now, I know I stated my opinions on Robinson Crusoe earlier, but I did actually quite enjoy Jane Gardam's novel about this girl who lives on an island and imagines she is Robinson Crusoe or something. It was interesting. And it was, English school was kind of easy, and so I wasn't doing a whole lot. I mean, I was going out and like exploring England, but I had so much time to read, so I just like read everything. It was great. This book is pretty good. Maybe my least favorite in this list, but still pretty good. Because next up, I actually don't remember the order in which we read these. So I'm going to talk about Yellowface. And I bought this like the day it came out. Yeah, first edition. And I hadn't read it yet. So maybe I don't get to brag about owning a first edition. Well, it's because I bought it for my dad. And he read it and it's fine. It's ended up on my shelves though. So I had to buy another copy there. It's wild, like everyone says. I don't need to tell you, you've seen it. The last book I kept from that class was Station 11. And again, I'm afraid of sad books. And I'd say before I read this, I had categorized it as a sad book, and it did make me cry, but it was ultimately so hopeful. And reading it post, you know, the real life global pandemic definitely colored my perceptions of it in a way that, you know, I'll never know what I would have thought about it before the events of that pandemic. But it was really beautiful, and it tied into the whole Shakespeare theme I was having. Emily, what can I say? She can craft a sentence. That's like the highest compliment I can bestow on a writer is, man, they can write a sentence, which is sort of the basic building block of the English language. But there you have it. Those are all the books I still own, because that's the theme of this video. Senior year, a crazy time. I I came back from England. None of those credits transferred as English credits, so I had to take 2 more English classes. Would we say had to, or would we say I got to take 2 more English classes? Because the classes I took that semester, fall of senior year, some of the best reading lists I've ever encountered. We'll start here. We'll start with Latinx Lit. Again, taught by another one of my favorite professors. I think we read a lot of, let me turn my notifications off, or I'll just put that on silent. We read a lot of essays, a lot of short fiction, poetry. So these were the only books I bought. These are the only books we had to buy. And starting with, I think my favorite, El Mesquite. This is a beautiful little novel, a fascinating little novel, told from the perspective of a mesquite tree. And it's talking about the history of Texas and the border of Mexico and that whole complicated history. But it's really an incredible piece of writing. And yeah, what can I say? I enjoyed it. I did my final project on this novel. I painted a bunch of birds. Because liberal arts, you can just paint birds and that counts as a final. I'm sorry to every STEM major out there. Either you're right, the humanities isn't real. It isn't real, but it's important. It's all about what's up here. In that class, we also read A Cup of Water Under My Bed. Great memoir. Again, Daisy Hernandez, she can craft a sentence. I know I read it all. I'm not sure how much I retained, because it was a crazy jam-packed semester with a lot going on. I still own it. I probably will for a long time. And the last book I bought, We Are Owed. This is a poetry collection by Ariana Brown. Some great poems with my crappy notes in them. Like this one is, I can't remember the word, but it's for when the poem is shaped like the thing it's about. Well, it's not about avocados, but you know, it's thick 'em up and it's shaped like an avocado. And isn't that adorable? Adorable is maybe not the word. It's very heavy stuff dealing with lots of real history. But yeah, I enjoyed it greatly. And we had lots of great conversations in class about these poems. Okay, getting down to the end here. If it seems like I'm rushing through this, that's the anxiety. Because now we get to maybe the greatest overall reading list of any English class I've ever taken. And that was also fall semester, senior year. A class I took called Food in Contemporary Asian American Literature and Culture. It was a class all about food, but oh my gosh. Let me put these in the order we read them in. I don't know if that's correct. First up, You Know It, You Love It, Crying in H Mart. We only read excerpts of this in class, but I already had the book because I had already read it. It's a great memoir. I don't need to tell you anything more. Crying in H Mart. Read it. Listen to the audiobook. Listen to Japanese Breakfast, because man, she's got some great tunes. And then The Woman Warrior. This is a classic in sort of the Asian American literature space. Maxine Hong Kingston. It's also sort of a biomythography, going back to Zami, blending memoir with fiction, so you kind of don't know what's real and what's not, and how that can kind of be a more accurate representation of one's own memories of childhood and whatnot. It was a great book. And again, great conversation, loved it. Still maybe my least favorite of this list, but that just tells you how great the books were in this class, because next we read Tastes Like War, another memoir related to food. And I think this should be even more popular than Crying in H Mart, because I do believe it's better. Not that you can really compare books like that. And again, I also love Crying in H Mart, but this book is so good. Definitely look up the trigger warnings if you want to read it. I'll read you a bit from the back. Grace M. Cho grew up as the daughter of a white American merchant marine and the Korean bar hostess he met abroad. It deals with her mother's schizophrenia and investigating that as kind of an outcome of the xenophobia her mother faced coming to live in Washington in the United States, rural Washington. But it's such a beautiful memoir and like introduced me to so many things I'd never thought before. And the descriptions of specifically blackberries and pie crust in this, outstanding. Grace Cho, she's a scholar. Last, but certainly not least, because it's my favorite book, of this whole list, maybe. Well, If we're discounting the books I read for my senior thesis, I think this was my favorite of the books I read in all of college. And that is The Book of Salt by Monique Trong. It's a novel imagining the life of this gay Vietnamese man who becomes the cook for Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas. And if you don't know who they are, it doesn't really matter. I was reading, and I like to read all the front matter, and so I was like, oh, there's a quote from Alice B. Toklas at the beginning. That's nice. And then I started it, and I was like, this is great, this is great. And then like the next chapter, it was like, Gertrude Stein is a character, and I freaked me out. This is incoherent. Gertrude Stein was a famous writer in like the 1930s in Paris. It's set in Paris. That's important to mention. And so this man, Vin, becomes their cook. But then we also get like his life growing up in Vietnam and how he came to be in Paris, and so much great description of food and love and Paris, and just like, God, I'm definitely gonna read it again someday, and maybe soon, because it's just like a perfect novel. And again, every single sentence is so supple and tender, like a well-cooked meal. Did that get a little gross? Maybe. I don't care. Last book, other than my thesis books, which, should I include these? We'll see how long the video is. Last up, which I read for my creative nonfiction class, a writing focused class. So we only read one book, and again, only excerpts of it, and then also a lot of short essays. And I was doing two thesis projects. Let's just say I didn't read everything in this class. But I did read most of Slouching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion. Maybe it's because we read it kind of out of order and pieced it together, but I didn't love it, and I'm a little scared to admit that on the internet. This might go in the giveaway pile someday, but it didn't. What can I say? Oh, there's still a bookmark in here. It just didn't do it for me, okay? I'm sorry. And that's it. These are all the books for my senior year. Well, this is less than half of the books I read for English my senior year, because for my creative writing thesis, I had to curate a list of 10. They didn't have to be books, but they ended up all being books for me. I had to curate a list of 10 titles to read that related in some way to my thesis, and then write a whole long annotated bibliography explaining why I had chosen them and what worked well and what I was going to take forwards my own writing. And I do still own all those books, so I guess that could be another video. How do you curate a list of titles based on a project you're writing? Sure, why not? That's all for this one.